Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. On today's episode, I'm interviewing Rossouw. He's the founder of Driven. He's one of the top resilience experts in the world. I'm going to quickly read out his bio here because there's just so much that he's done. He is a resilience expert and the author of Executive Resilience, a book that delves into the neuroscience of cultural resilience. He's the founder of Driven, an integrated AI-powered resilience program that's used by hundreds of organizations worldwide, combining workshops, peer training, certifications, and technology to create a culture of resilience underpinned with resilience first aid certified programs and champions. He developed high adversity resilience training, HART, used in defense and emergency response. He's published multiple research papers on the neuroscience of resilience assessment, and new analytics frameworks to better understand the deeper functioning and value of resilience. So that's his short bio. So there's a huge amount that Jurie's done. I took so much out of the interview talking to him, and I find it really inspiring and just empowering to hear what he's doing. The work he's doing is so needed in this time, and I'm sure you'll all take a lot out of this interview. I really hope you enjoy. Jurie, thank you so much for coming on the Move Your Mind podcast. We just had a chat on Clubhouse. I'm learning continually about all the amazing work you're doing. As I said before, I feel like I need to up my game talking to you because you've done and are doing so much, but it really is amazing work. So first of all, I just want to say, thank you for having this conversation because I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's fantastic to be here, and it's good to get on Clubhouse finally after I've been hearing about it for a long time. So thanks for the opportunity there to actually get on board and try it out.
Yep, exactly. We made it work. We didn't have any technology glitches. We're doing all of these recordings between New York and Sydney. It seems to be working so far. Maybe touch wood. I'm touching my one desk here to make sure this goes smoothly as well.
This is the day when technology just works.
Brilliant. Well, I'll take it. So before we get into it, are you able to give us a background on yourself, what you went through, how you got to where you are now, and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. And it's kind of interesting, I suppose it's a bit similar to you as well, where it's been really me working on my own mental health initially, and that was what initially sparked my interest, basically as a kid, dealing with things like depression and so on, and in my 20s as well, and then starting to study more about psychology and organizational psychology and later neuroscience as well, really looking at things that can help me. And over time, I found a whole bunch of things that came together and that really changed my mindset and really gave me a much more positive outlook and the ability to take on a lot more stress more effectively and actually enjoy the challenge that comes with it. So really what I then started to do as well was, and what I realized was that the time that it took me to actually learn all those things just felt like it took me way too long. It would have been great if these things were just available and together as something that I could more easily access. So that's really where the idea of the program came around, as something that can be more accessible for people, something that other people can benefit from, to be able to see, here's all the research from about 2 decades of research come together in really simplified ways. And that's where Driven as an artificial intelligence virtual coach comes in as almost the exact tool that I wish that I had as a teenager to just show me these things that I really need to know, and just make it a lot easier for me to potentially have learned those things in the past. So I haven't been able to do time travel and all that yet, and take it back to me. At least for other people, it's something that is now available and makes it much more easy to access all these ideas and all these exercises that really build resilience.
Absolutely, and you never know. We might get to inventing time travel in the way you're going with all of these programs. That might be in the next 5 or 10 years. That's the next thing. But no, I love all of what you're talking about there, and the fact that it stemmed from personal experience. I think it is such an important thing, and it's similar to my journey of how I fell into mental health and started building some of the programs that I do. It's because personal experience will show you the gaps, and you have to learn through trial and error. And then, as you said, I wish that I had met you 20 years ago when I was going through that and had these tools available to me, because we don't know at that age, and we don't have enough good quality preventative educational programs available. We should be learning from a very young age about so many different areas and how we can better ourselves and be equipped for all of the difficulties life throws at us. So it's just so important what you're doing, and makes so much sense why we need it, why we need these resources.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say there as well, because it feels like something that should really be part of the school curriculum. It's just, along with all the technical and the theoretical knowledge that you gain, also just to gain more personal knowledge about, your own psychology and your own mindset. And it's almost like, how do you operate this complicated machine in your head, which is your brain? Like we kind of need an instruction manual for that, and some knowledge that comes along with it, just to be able to to understand ourselves, make the most of our lives, and really have those key critical skills that essentially come together that creates resilience in us, that just prepares us for everything that's going to happen, because we're all going to face all kinds of difficult situations through life, and we're not going to know what it's going to be. So that's really where we need that foundational skill. So yeah, it'd be great if we can just have that included for everyone by default.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I really, believe in and want to, think is so important long term, what you're talking about, early education, embedding this in schools and those areas. And what you said there is such an important point, where it's kind of crazy, because we're taught in life about what process to follow and what structures and what manual. I love the word, how you use that word, manual. We're taught that in our careers, but we're not taught in which I believe is the most important area of life, in our emotional well-being, our health, our relationships, our communication, how we conduct ourselves. We're not taught that. So we're literally sort of, we go through school, we go to university, and we got to learn through trial and error, as both of us have, and through great struggle. It's crazy that we could prevent so many issues if we did have that manual available. I just find it continually gobsmacking that it's not more of a thing.
Exactly, and it seems like such a natural thing. Like whenever you need to learn some new piece of software or something you need to use at work, or you need to learn how to drive a car, then there's instructions and there's things that come with it, and you get some training for it. And really the brain is the most complex machine that you'll ever own, and why don't we just get a training manual for that? That's really what we need. And and like you were saying, it can have such a massive impact on relationships and everything else in life. So yes, and that's essentially where the PR6 and those tools that we've created comes in as to something that then gives us that overview and that manual essentially about how do I use my brain.
Yeah, well, talking about the PR6, it's one of the many questions I want to ask you. Can you tell me more about the PR6 model, how it works, what it involves, and how people can access it?
Yeah, cool. So the PR6 is the Predictive 6-Factor Resilience Model. So that is one that we published research on. So that was one of my first big research projects, which is really just about how do we understand what exactly is resilience, what are those domains of resilience that enable us to create all these different skills that help us to take on all the different challenges in life. So it's something that we've developed an assessment around, so people can actually understand themselves, and then also a bunch of different programs that can help to actually learn the skills about how do we actually practice, what exercises do we do, what techniques do we implement in our minds to be able to build these 6 domains of resilience. So the domains themselves are vision, which is about your sense of meaning and purpose in life. There's composure, which is more about stress management, emotion awareness, and regulation. There's reasoning, which is more the proactive side of resilience. A lot of people tend to think of resilience as being reactive, but it's also very proactive. This is where things like resourcefulness and critical thinking and introspection comes into play. There's also health, which is sleep, nutrition, exercise, so actually looking after yourself physically. Then there's tenacity, which is more about staying persistent, maintaining motivation, overcoming mistakes, things like that. And then finally, but very importantly, there's collaboration, which is more about human connection, your support networks, communication skills, all those different types of collaborative parts of life. So that resilience is not just about ourselves, but it's also about the connections that we have. So with the Driven app, there people can actually take the PR6 assessment themselves and be able to see, what are my individual strengths and where do I have opportunities to learn and grow. And then from that, the virtual coach then starts to take you through a prioritized curriculum of activities, which is just like 5 minutes a day. So it's nice and easy to learn those, but thereby just having something every day to start working on all these different areas of resilience in your life, and just kind of create those neural pathways in the brain so that later on in life, when you need it, those skills are available and they're much more natural for you to use because you get to practice them through the app itself. So yeah, that's basically a whole big model that we've created there, used by a lot of organizations, universities, and psychologists and so on to understand more resilience in people and resilience in different contexts. So it's just been really interesting that since we've launched that, just how widely it's been used, and how it's tens of thousands of people that's already used it, and wow, organizations and things like that. So it's been really fantastic to just kind of see the interest in it, and just in terms of making it simple as well for people to be able to understand what is resilience and what do I need to do.
Yeah, and people access that through the app, you were saying?
Yeah.
For everyone listening?
Yeah, so the Driven Resilience app, yes, exactly. Yep. So, and that's available on iOS and Android as well, so you can just look for the Driven Resilience app, and as you get into it, that's basically the first thing that it starts with, and it's basically $10 Australian a month, about 7 or 8 US a month, and that gives you the report and everything else that comes with it to get that really useful insight. So even just doing that initial part to understand where am I at now, that is something that's really useful. Something else actually that, and this is just because I really love data and all those kind of things that I probably should point out as well, that we saw recently, was that most people tend to score around 70% or so of resilience. But even at that level, there's still some level of vulnerability. And that's because most people don't really have those skills practiced across the 6 domains. But if you work on the skills and you go up to about 85% plus, which is the high range of resilience, that's when people actually become protected from mental illness. That's when we see the likelihood of depression and anxiety drops dramatically. And because essentially when you're in that high range, if you face some kind of challenge, it actually ends up having much less of an impact mentally because you're much more prepared and you have much more confidence in dealing with that situation. So that was just something really interesting that I saw recently when I was mapping out all these charts and seeing just what really protects people in terms of, as you're practicing all those different resilience skills.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because it's not, it's not about doing one thing, or there's no one size fits all. It's about doing a number of different things, and not just understanding it or not just doing it for a little bit of time, but a big thing I talk about is creating habits, rewiring your mind to make that embedded into your routine. So really making that part of which what you're talking about here, making that part of your day-to-day life and doing that preventative work, because then when things do become hard or you go through a difficult time, you've got this automatic behavior to fall back on, which that's when it really comes in handy. So it's not, I think it's an important point. It's not about this just being used for people that are really struggling or suffering, or I'm going to just go and refer to, this program when I'm going through a tough time. It's really anyone. Everyone can improve their well-being by doing these different things, because even if we're doing okay, we can do better. It's it's the analogy of I want to lose 10 kilograms. I probably know what I could do. I go to the gym, go on a diet, do all this different stuff for a few months, lose the weight. If I stop doing that, then it'll come back on. It's an ongoing process, and it's not about just doing what you need to do to get to a certain point. It's doing it for forever and always improving and learning, and there's no end point. It's just creating these ongoing habits. Yeah,
and it's very, very much like we were talking about before as well, where it's very similar to physical fitness, so just like we were saying now too, where it's about doing that kind of exercise on an ongoing basis. And kind of the earlier you start with it, the more you reduce your risk of heart attacks and all these type of things, and more you get the health benefits that come from just consistently looking after yourself on a physical level. And with exercise as well, of course, it's more about getting a whole body workout so that you maintain that kind of whole body fitness as well. So that's essentially what the PR6 shows as well, is how do you, what do you need to do to be able to do a whole mind workout, like a whole brain workout? Like, these are all the domains you need to exercise. And as you do that proactively, and the more you do that over time, the more you've got this mental fitness that really protects you at a mental level, just as physical fitness protects you at a physical level. Or the physical fitness also helps on the mental side too. And of course, in many ways, the mental side, helps you to kind of stick to exercise in the first place, and stick to healthy eating when you might feel like I just want to take a while off. Then resilience is one of those things that keep you going. So they're very closely connected. But it's very much that idea, like what you were saying, that it's more about the preventative side, investing in these things now already, so that you don't wait until something happens and then you say, oh, okay, now I need to look after my mental health. When really, if you start doing it early on, and even when we start supporting this resilience in each other as well, and have that community effect, then that is what really protects us in the long term. So that is really what we need to be much more mindful of. And what I think is probably one of the biggest things that need to change in society is that let's not wait until people are struggling before we care about their mental health. That's kind of the current approach to mental health. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons for why mental illness is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, because we're not really doing things about what the causes. We're not really preventing. We're not really investing enough in that proactive space. So that's where resilience really comes in and says, like, here are the 6 domains that we all need to work on, the things that we really need to invest in on a proactive level. And really, as we do that, we start to enjoy life more. We become more confident in ourselves and taking on whatever challenges come our way. So there's all these benefits to it. We just actually need to invest in it. And that's really kind of one of the biggest messages that we want to give out there, is that, hey, let's all start to work on this now. Let's not wait.
Absolutely. And I think it's just such an important point. And, when we look at this spectrum, it's so complicated. There's so many different areas to it. There's, it's important to have reactive services, and if you're struggling, you need to know where to go. You need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or, you can go and type into Google free mental health helpline and find help.
Yeah.
There's so many different things, and we need to understand all of it. But as you're saying, I couldn't agree more that there simply is not enough money and not enough money put into preventative resources. There's not enough good quality preventative resources. There's not enough, thinking going behind that. And that is actually how we make a longer term change, because it's not just, we shouldn't be waiting for it to become that problem. We should be integrating these behaviors into our day-to-day lives. And it makes such a difference. I mean, just to give a really quick personal example from my own life, even, I've been on my own journey, and I've developed these different things through trial and error, and through learning that work for me. And the big ones are meditation. I meditate every day. Exercise is the biggest. I grew up competing in sport, and I find it profound how much I do it purely for my mind. It just helps so much. Gratitude journaling, and then having supportive relationships around me. But I went through a period about 5 years ago where I had two different things just completely fall apart in my life, and I fell into this hole, and it was stuff that I couldn't control myself, and I was panicking, and I didn't know what to do, and there was nothing I could physically do about it. But I was able to get through it and actually cope quite well, because I would wake up every morning and think, okay, well, what can I control here? Well, you know what? I've got all these things that I do that make me feel good. I can go to the gym, I can meditate, I can see my friends, I can, lean on these different people to support me. I can remind myself what I'm grateful for. And that was so empowering. And I think about that every day now, because I know, again, it reminds me that even when things are going well, these things that you might not feel like you need in that period do help. And I, no matter what's happening in my life, I make sure that I do every day, or almost every day, these things that can, help me and make me feel good. And I think it reinforces, that point about what you're doing and why it's so important that people do take that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. It just making me think now as well, because it's one of the things you're just pointing at now is like understanding those things about your own habits that actually have an impact on you and that helps you get through those times. For a lot of people that just don't have that kind of awareness. So life might be fine for a good while, and then suddenly something happens and you kind of go off the tracks for a bit and you don't know how do you get back on the track? How do you get back to a positive mindset? Because you don't have that awareness of the things that really work for you and that actually give you a sense of meaning and give you a sense of happiness with life. And a lot of people just get stuck in that type of space for a long time, just trying to figure out like what's going on. And it's really difficult. It can take a lot to get through that. So having more of that kind of awareness ahead of time and investing it ahead of time, that really makes a big difference. So that when something happens, because there's always going to be something happening. So just like what we saw with COVID as well, where nobody really expected that, and here we are like a couple of years later, and it's going to be a changed world, and there's going to be other things that's going to happen along the way, whether it's at a global level or if it's going to be at an individual level, just something very personal that happens. There's always going to be stuff like that. There's always going to be challenges, and if you're more prepared for it, if we understand ourselves better and we understand these skills better, then we just have a lot more confidence to be able to get through it, and we have those social connections and all those things that we have invested in ahead of time, so that very similar to what you were saying, just having that network as well of people that can support you because you knew how important it would be one day. And also just because it's fun to have friends and people that really support you as well.
Exactly. I mean, it just forgetting everything else, it feels good to have quality relationships, and I think that's a whole nother topic though. That gets highly confused now with actual what is a meaningful relationship and a real connection compared to I've got a million followers on social media, or I'm talking to on all these different digital platforms, connecting with all these people. Yeah, I know all these people. I'm so popular. I feel great, but that's not the same thing as having one authentic relationship. And I always say it's more meaningful to go and actually connect and have a real conversation with a stranger than to be paid platitudes by having 100 different so-called friends around you. So it's like it's another a whole other conversation, but something to be aware of. We need to remind ourselves.
Yeah, and especially it's an important point there where it can seem like I've got a lot of connections and all that on different platforms and kind of friends-ish type of people, but I suppose one of the biggest measures are like, do you get to share the more vulnerable things about yourself with those people? Like, do you get to actually be yourself and talk about the things that's really going on? Or is it more a case of you've kind of got this persona that you put on, and even when you're talking to this friend, you still have that persona that you're a little bit hiding behind, which I think for a lot of people is what it becomes like these days, especially with social media, where there is this type of facade that we put up, and we want to try and portray that sense that things are going well, and how about you? Let's talk about all the fun things in life, but we don't really talk about the things that might actually be bothering us. So that's more, I think, exactly like what you're talking about, where it's having those people in your life, even if it's just one or two people, that you can just really talk about what's actually going on and have that really authentic connection. So incredibly important.
Incredibly important. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, even if it's only one person, I always say, I've got 3 people that I had from the beginning of my mental health journey. When I first was getting through it, I had at the time my mum, my psychologist, and my best friend supporting me, and it was profound how much it helped. And to this day, I've got those people that 24/7 you can talk to, you can rely on. They can rely on you. They know you inside out. It might be a 30-second phone call to just, if you're having a meltdown, saying, "Hey, I'm." And straight away they can diffuse it because they're like, hey, I know you, Nick, and I know all these triggers, and I know what you're going through. No, it's okay. And sometimes that's all you need to hear. But knowing that you've got that there, it gives you that backbone that you sort of feel like, And I feel that in New York. You know, I don't have that many, close relationships and people here that I trust, but because I've got these people on the other side of the world that I know I can rely on, you still feel it, and you feel like you can, no matter what happens or how bad things could get, you can still cope. And it's a really, it's profound how much.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and that's why that collaboration side of resilience is so important, because we are just inherently social creatures. Like even introverts as well. It's not about being introverts and extroverts. Like even an introvert still has that deeply wired need in the brain to have some of those authentic connections. And it's one of the things that I saw in the research quite a while back as well, is that I think back in before 2000, most people had at least one or two close personal connections that they actually would talk about the really deep and more personal things to. And more recently, that's shifted to most people have 0 people that they can actually talk to and share those deep things to. Because it's become, I feel, a bit more superficial in terms of the connections overall, especially with social media.
That's it's alarming to hear, and I guess I can forget that stuff even though I work in this area, because I'm just so used to now connecting and having that. It's just is the most important thing in the whole world to me. I just feel like if I can't connect, it's like, well, you go crazy. But it's really alarming what you're saying there, and it just reiterates how important it is that we keep that conversation going and we educate people about this kind of stuff. And because it's it's not the shiny things that are going to make you feel good. It's the really deep, authentic things, and the things that are available to everyone, which is the good part about it. The things that really are going to help us are available everywhere. So anyway, that's probably a topic we could do a whole podcast on. I don't want to detract too much from what we're talking about here.
Well, it's essentially relevant because it's basically where Resilience First Aid comes in, which is essentially this new program that we've created, which is really about exactly this, which is teaching us as individuals, how can we support our friends? How can we be that person that is there for someone else and that talks more proactively about these things that actually matter in life? And it's something that we saw with Adele recently, launching her new album. And on Instagram, she posted about this, that she was going through a really difficult period in her life over the last while. And what really helped her were the friends that were there to pull her out of those kind of dark moments that she had in herself, and to say like, hey, let's get out of here. Let's go do something, and just be there for her, and be those people that can be there with that authentic connection and just help in that moment. So that's essentially what Resilience First Aid is about, is teaching people like, how can you be that friend that Adele had and be that friend to people around you, or whether it's your colleagues or your staff at work. So essentially what it does is it teaches language that we can use, what are the actual phrases and things that we can practice and that we can think about in terms of like, how can I have a conversation about this? How can I notice the highs and lows of resilience so that I can recognize when someone is struggling with composure or with collaboration or reasoning, and also recognize the strength in people as well. So when someone is really good in vision or someone's really good at tenacity, being able to recognize those skills in each other and actually be able to give each other more interesting compliments and highlight our strengths, so that because that's the kind of things that people often remember, is that, my friend said that I'm really good at persistence, and it highlights to people that actually that is something that I'm really good at, and it's something that people then remember like years and years down the track, and it actually becomes more consciously a strength for them that they can rely on. And that's part of the stuff that we want to teach people, is how to just have those conversations in everyday language and in everyday situations. How can we be the one that supports resilience in others? And also, as we support resilience in others, we also learn more about resilience ourselves. So that's essentially the concept of Resilience First Aid, which is really exactly as we were talking before. It's being much more preventative, much more proactive about mental health. Let's not wait until our friends and our staff and so on are struggling. Let's do something now. let's start to make it practical. Let's start to have these conversations that actually just build authentic relationships. So that's really what it comes down to. How do we do that? How do we learn again how to build these really important relationships and just make it really practical?
Absolutely, and it's such an important thing, and it's something that we need to have that guideline of how to change, because often in cultures and in the workplace, especially, these cultures. I know when I've been in there, you see these. It's like a microcosm of society, because you've got these cultures that are so embedded, and it's like, how do we change this? And you can go in there and say some really good things, and people like it and they get excited, but then it's like, well, what are you living with? How do you change it? And I think that's why it's so great what you're doing with these programs. It's giving a guideline for that, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. How can we build a resilient workforce, and what are some of the issues you see in the workplace with when it comes to resilience and these things? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, but maybe going into a little bit more detail
so
on that.
Probably one of the big thematic issues we've already talked a little bit about is how it tends to be very much about the reactive side. So a lot of organizations have emergency or employee assistance programs and other types of reactive solutions for when people are really struggling, but don't have as much of an effective proactive response to be able to build resilience and build mental health in a more proactive way. So that's where often it starts with just being able to get that initial insight to see where are we at, what's happening in the organization at the moment. So that's where the PR6 as an assessment is something that's really useful. Being able to do that, for teams and for the organization, being able to see, okay, these teams are doing well, these teams are struggling. What are they struggling in, or what are these others doing well from? Let's learn from those and let's prioritize how can we assist these individuals over here. But one of the big challenges with organizations is that resilience is really like an equation. There's the individual effort, but there's also the organizational effort. Because if it's all placed on the individual to be more resilient so that more stress can be put on them, then that's not going to work. Because then people, you're more likely to build resentment than resilience. So that's where the organizational side is really important. So how does the leadership and management and so on invest in creating a culture and creating an environment that supports resilience in the staff themselves? So that is especially where something like resilience first aid is useful, where as a manager being able to learn, how can I support my staff? How can I create a good environment? How can I change the language that I use so that in the things that I say actually build good connections with my staff, it supports them, it creates a more uplifting environment, and thereby the staff can see that we're investing in them, I'm investing in myself, I'm putting time into creating a healthy environment, and then the staff tend to be a lot more inspired themselves as well to see that, okay, it's not just about me being stronger to deal with more stress, but it's actually we are all working together here to create a culture of resilience. So that's one of the biggest things that we work with organizations on, is how can we kind of balance that equation with the effort that's being put in to create that real deeper culture of resilience where people actually feel supported. So and of course, one of the big things as well is creating that peer support network as well, like embedding champions into the environment, where it's something that we're seeing more recently as well, where people are more interested in how can I as an individual support resilience in each other. And that's also where things like resilience first aid comes in, and giving people more physical tools as well and things that they can use. And that's where we've got the resilience first aid kits, which are nice fun little tools that people can have, like fridge magnets and things like that, with all these different skills on them about resilience that you can build out, and have all these different things available that just kind of bring out the really mental stuff and bring it into the physical world and create these conversation pieces and things like that. So just make it a bit more fun, a bit more interactive and engaging. And that's, of course, a big word. How do we maintain engagement over time? And that's really where all of these things come together. So, yeah, all kinds of different things, I suppose.
Yeah, but I love that. And like you're saying, I think it's a really important point with the workplace. It's not about just the employees, it's not just about the managers, it's about everyone
Yeah.
making that step forward, having the tools available. And I think, again, looking at that as a microcosm for life, it's not about just one part of society doing these things. It's how do we get to a point where every individual can actually make that decision themselves and say, hey, you know what? I want to improve myself. I want to be a leader in the community and inspire other people to do the same thing and educate them. And if we can all have that mindset, that's actually how a
Yeah.
huge change gets made. And, I love it that your program is promoting that and, helping to facilitate that happening because that's how you make those big changes. So I think it's really important, and so many of the things you talked about with that are just such great points. And just for everyone
Yeah.
listening, and at the end, we'll have a chance to sort of direct everyone where they can go. But for the resilience first aid, where can people go listening now if they want to look more into it, if they wanted to
Yeah,
interact with
cool.
it?
So Resilience
Where
First
can we send
Aid
them?
is a 2-day certification course. You can find it on resilienceFirstAid.com. And there we've got options for blended training. So it's like virtual, like live workshops where people can join in from all over the world, and also online versions where if you want to do it completely self-paced, then that's an option as well. So yeah, resilienceFirstAid.com, nice and easy to find it. And especially for organizations, it's something we want to do more work there, just to be able to embed these people and skill up managers and so on, to just be able to invest more in people and to create more of that environment and culture of resilience. So yeah, it's a nice fun course with all kinds of resources and things that come with it, and that means it just becomes more of a tangible thing as well, which I think you mentioned before. It just makes it a bit more interesting to talk about all these things and make it easier to talk about it as well, just because all of these things, and I suppose is what you found as well, it's actually fun to talk about these things. It's not about like mental illness where we talk about it and it's kind of hard to have those conversations. Where these things, when we talk about resilience, it's learning about each other's motivations and goals, and what are we doing with our our gym routines and all that lately, and how are we maintaining our motivation, and all these different things that are much more proactive and much more interesting, and we just really get to learn about each other, and thereby actually building that sense of protection in our minds in the process.
Exactly, and that's the thing, and I think we spoke a little bit about it earlier, where when it comes to this area, it's not just about this isn't something that's meant to be this deep dark thing that you only explore when you're in your lowest depth. It's not something that should be seen as a chore to explore. It's something which again I love with your resilience first aid, how you have a lot of tangible things that come with it, because it's an area where it can be intangible, and people that haven't explored it before can go like, well, where do I begin? And I can't, the physical side we can see, you want to lose weight, you want to go to the gym, you go and pick up a weight, you can see the results. The results are more inside, and how you feel. So when you're sort of new to it, it's hard to understand, but I love that you've made it tangible, and it's for everyone, and it's the kind of thing that it's not, it shouldn't be seen as something we're scared of doing. It's something that's fun, and once you start doing it, it feels good. You can relate to other people with it, you can share, you can motivate each other, you can support each other, and once you get into that, you don't
that's so
stop.
true. And
You
I
want to
think
keep going.
it's exactly those skills that we learn to build authentic connections. And as we build it and as we support others, and that's one of the things we see in the research as well, about having that sense of well-being. When it's actually when we help other people that we really get a sense of well-being ourselves. We get that feeling that, that actually feels really good just to do something for someone else. And at the same time, we're building those strong connections that we might use ourselves at some point when something happens in our lives, and it's just building that really strong and supportive network where just life just kind of feels good, because it's one of those things when you've got people who are interested in you and what you're doing, and you're interested in them, then it's just kind of fun, right? That's what life is about, really, isn't it?
Exactly. It's meant to be fun. It should be enjoyable and connected, and doesn't have to be. I think life can be incredibly complicated, but it can also be simple. And it's, again, up to us to decide which one we want to go with. Because if we let the outside world affect us, it'll become complicated to the point of losing your mind and just, because we've got 24/7 stimulation, there's endless, streams to look at. We can compare ourselves to other people. It doesn't end. But if you want, you can make your life very simple and just strip back to the basics, and it's having those boundaries and understanding in yourself, hang on, what are the things that I'm going to allow in and what am I not? And we only, again, get to that point by having the self-awareness to start looking at what is it that's important for me, and then having the conviction to put that into practice, which I think what you're doing teaches people
exactly right, because that's essentially what we talk about in the domain of vision, where it's getting that clarity in your own mind, like what is really important to me, what really matters to me, and thereby having that ability to essentially simplify life a lot, because then you really get to see, because you have that measuring stick about, is this thing important? Is this important? And you start to realize, actually, a whole bunch of these other things that I'm thinking about doesn't really matter that much. I don't actually need to worry about that. And instead, I need to worry about and think about these other things that really matter to me, and whether that's connections with people, which is usually what it comes back to, that you then start to prioritize in life, and you start to become much more able to say no to a whole bunch of things. So you just start to clear out like all this clutter out of your mind, and life just becomes simpler. It becomes easier to enjoy life. And I think that's just something that so many of us can use these days, just because of how many things there are that's constantly competing for our attention. It's like, oh, you need to think about this, and this is important, you need to do this. And you can just say, no, I'm good. I've got these things that really matter to me. And you actually feel good about that. And you feel confident in the choices that you make around that as well. So yeah, it's such an important thing. And that's essentially the kind of things that we get to learn about when we learn about resilience. And you start to do that more at a proactive level. So it's not a case of just waiting until something big happens and then you have these moments of realization, but it's rather, let's bring those moments of realization of the future, bring it into the present, and you start kind of simplifying and improving life now already. That's, I think, really what we all need to do.
Exactly. We all need to do it, no matter who you are, no matter what position you're in. And I was saying to you earlier when we were chatting on Clubhouse, I'm in New York at the moment, and I meet so many people that are making huge amounts of money, but their whole motivation in life has been, I need to get to this point, and they're not putting any effort into their own personal development. It's sort of grinding to get to this point and on this ladder, and then you get there and you need more, and you just see how they're addicted to getting on the feedback loop. And it's like, hang on, well, what is the... And I looked at it, I was like, well, why do you even need that much money? I had this moment recently. I was in Vancouver, and I was... it's one of my favorite places in the world, and it's just so beautiful and amazing, mountains and scenery. And I was just on my own having a coffee, just staring at a mountain, and I just had this thought in my head, because I get trapped often putting that pressure on myself. I'm competitive by nature, I guess, and thinking I need to do more and achieve more, and what's next. And I was like staring at this mountain, I was thinking, hang on, even if I became a billionaire, even if I became a billionaire, I'm going to get probably more enjoyment just standing here and looking at this bloody mountain than everything else that it brings. And it just reminded me, life doesn't have to be so complicated. It's all this stuff's available to us now, and we don't need as much as we think.
And I think it's one of the challenges is that most of us only really realize that once something really terrible has happened, and then we think like, oh my God, like I wish I spent my time differently. I wish I did this rather than that. Yeah. So, and that's really what we're trying to do with the training as well, is like, let's bring that moment here, and let's start to think about it now, so you can start to prioritize now and make these and have that realization that looking at a mountain is actually a lot more fun, and I don't actually need a whole lot of money to be able to do that, because mountain is just there anyway. And I think it's where a lot of us realize we need a lot less than what we think we do, or what social media or society or whatever tries to convince us that we need. And the sooner we realize that, and the sooner we can start to act according to that, the happier I think we all would be.
Absolutely. No, really, yeah. It's something we all need to think about. So we're just, before I move on to the final part of this, what are some things that you yourself do daily that help you, that everyone listening could take into
daily
account?
it's very much about the physical side, like looking after my physical health. So I do meal prep on Saturdays, where I've got the full week of food ready to go. So I eat in at fairly similar times. I think it's one of the jokes in the office as well, that people can kind of time the day by when I'm having which meal, because I have about 5 of them during the day as well. And
don't need a clock in your office. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, because Jurie's gone out for lunch. So things like that. So I get up at a very similar time, go to bed at a very similar time each day, and in the gym 4 days a week as well. Having that kind of routine that essentially gives me the physical stamina, I suppose, along with the supports the mental stamina as well, to be able to work and at a very high level, very consistently, is something that really helps me. The main mental thing that I generally use, which is to be fairly clear on what I want to accomplish, and thereby everything that happens during the day to be able to look at, is this getting me to the thing that really matters, that gives me a sense of meaning in life, which is really to make a big difference and to really help people. So that's always kind of the measure for me. It's like, these things that are happening now, things are not going well, or this is happening, or this thing is now suddenly popped up. What do I need to actually worry about here, and what action do I need to take to be able to move me closer towards that goal? So so that's kind of the main routines for me, I suppose, even though the mental side is not necessarily a routine, but it's more of an action that I perform, depending on what happens, because every day is different. It's always, startup life, it's always kind of crazy things that happen from one day to the next, so you don't really know.
Yeah, exactly. Anything could happen, but and I think it's about not being, having things that you do that are good for you, but not being so rigid as well, and being able to be a bit fluid with it, and knowing what you need to do at a certain point, and just having that awareness and that mindfulness of checking in and making sure, am I doing too much of this, not enough of that? It's all a fluid process, but it's part of having that self-awareness about what you're doing. And going back to the workplace, it's it's one of the biggest issues, and it's why, and you see that people can get results in the short term and push themselves, and but that's not sustainable. And it's again why in the workplace we need to look at these things, because even if you can get the results in the short term, you're going to burn out, and you're not going to be able to sustain it. So it's going to be better for not only your well-being, but your actual productivity and your performance and the end outcome as well. So,
yeah, exactly.
So I'll finish. I've got these closing questions, and then I'll just go back to ask you where we can send everyone listening, and how they can, just reiterating how they can learn more about you. But I finish every interview with these 5 closing questions. These, so nothing too crazy. I'm not going to catch you too far off guard, but these can be sort of short, one line or whatever it comes to mind. But the first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
I would say it would be probably when I was about 13, 14, around there, pretending to be a chemical engineer and building the model rockets and things like that with my friends, and just firing them off and trying to figure out things that work, and working on nozzles and all these kind of things. So all very nerdy kind of stuff, but yeah, just lots of fun and lots of experimentation. And it was also is one of those things of actually going outside and doing things like, remember those days when we actually used to go outside? Yeah.
Oh, that was good. Exactly. I feel so. It's crazy. I remember growing up, and you're climbing trees and kicking a football in the park, and you're not sitting there. We didn't have video games in our house, and I'm so grateful. Just missed this whole period of. So it is. It seems like a different world. It is a different world, but yeah.
Yeah. Now it's the screens.
Now it's all about the screens. which are enabling us to do this interview right
Yes.
now. But it's
good things. There are good things.
there are good things and a lot of bad things.
But
Anyway,
yes.
again, that's a whole nother podcast interview.
Exactly.
That's round 2. What do you feel like is the biggest burden on mental health currently in society?
Yeah, I think it's a number of different things, because there are the big factors, kind of COVID aside almost, but the big drivers of global uncertainty, whether it's climate change and geopolitical movements and things like that, where it just makes so many more people worried these days about like what kind of world are we heading into, and especially for younger generations who are looking at like, what's the next 60, 80 years of my life going to look like? Is the world even going to be a good place to live in? So I think that's one of the big things that's weighing on people, and it's also one of the big reasons why we essentially need that kind of goal-directed resilience together as a society to take on these big challenges. There are the personal challenges that we need resilience for, and there's the community and societal resilience that we need to be able to take on these really big global challenges as well. So there's that, but then there's also a lot of challenges with social media that's very divisive, amplifying the division between views, because it's more it's more click-based, and the things that gets clicks are the things that tends to be more inflammatory and creates a whole bunch of challenges all by itself. And then there's all the image-related stuff with social media as well. That's a big challenge. And then on the other hand, I think even in I think we tend to romanticize like the old days, like the 50s and so on, where like, we used to be better at communicating, but I think even then we were never really that good at talking about mental health. So I think it's one of the things that we have never really been that good at talking about mental health. So I think that's one of the big challenges that we have, is we're now starting to learn more about it, and how do we as a society start to build more resilience and be more proactive about that. So it's probably just one of those inherent human conditions that's been there for a long time that we're just now starting to figure out, like, what do we actually do?
Exactly, yeah. I think it's always been there, but it's something we need to talk more about. And do you see things improving over the next decade?
I think so, and I think that's one of the big things that we can do in the next 10 years, especially with working on resilience and being more proactive and getting these things out there to start to especially for organizations. I think is where they have one of the biggest leverages, kind of levers that they can pull in terms of, let's do something for larger organizations and get that out into populations much faster, because it benefits the organization, but it also benefits the larger communities as well. So I think we have a chance to really improve things in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I totally agree. So two more questions here.
Yeah.
What is your personal definition of happiness?
A general sense of contentment. But happiness, I think, is one of those things that's not as important. I think it's more about having a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And happiness, like if it comes around, great. But it's not.
Couldn't agree more. And the reason I use happiness for that is because everyone looks at the goal is to be happy, but our definition of happiness is kind of wrong. It should be about not, because happiness. Otherwise, it's about how do I just get things that are like a bit of a drug fix. Feel that high, but it's more about how do I get that deep sense of purpose and meaning. So even when things are going bad, I've still got that sort of grounded feeling inside. That's what happiness should be. Final question here. What is, you've probably done many. I know you have done many, actually. What's one of the most courageous things you've ever done?
Probably the biggest one, I suppose, is quitting a nice, comfortable corporate job to launch Driven and go into the whole startup world. Because I think, as they say, a startup is great for when you're tired of working 40 hours a week for someone else, and you instead want to work 80 hours for yourself for half the pay. And That's generally what it's like. But just kind of all the uncertainty and all the things that come with that is a whole big experience, I suppose. But that was one of the things that just became the reality for me, is that the corporate world felt like, it was too easy, and I wasn't really, getting to do anything really meaningful and things that really help people, and rather taking on that challenge of, let's see if can I, make a bit of a bigger difference in terms of launching these ideas and putting this stuff into new types of approaches that hadn't really been tried before, and just giving that a shot and see what happens. And so far, it's been great.
Absolutely. Having that meaning behind what you're doing and doing something that you truly believe in, it's amazing. And I know you're making a huge difference through it, and I feel very lucky to be able to have this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I know everyone listening is going to get so much out of it. So just as a final thing and a reminder, and we'll put all of this in the show notes, so there'll be links for everyone to find where to go to get your resources and learn more about Driven. But just to reinforce that, where can people go if they want to access Resilience First Aid and the other tools that you have available?
Yeah, cool. So Resilience First Aid is easy. Just go to resilienceFirstAid.com, and there's all the workshops, everything there. And the Driven Resilience app can be found just on iOS and on the Android app stores. So yeah, that's all there, nice and easy to find. And if anyone wants to get in touch and chat more about it, so I'm always available to talk more about this, and keen to just talk about ideas to get this out into more organizations and for more people, and even schools and things that we're working with as well. So it'd be fantastic to get in touch and talk to some people, and just get all these ideas out there, which is really what makes a difference.
Absolutely. Well, Jurie, thanks again for talking about all of this and sharing so much valuable information. And again, anyone listening, you can go to the links in the show notes to find all of the information. And once again, thank you.
Cool, fantastic, great to chat. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to learn more about Jurie or Driven, you can go to hellodriven.com, or you can go to resilienceFirstAid.com, and you can find the Driven app on the App Store or on Android. If you want to learn more, you can go to nickbracks.com/podcast. You can also find my book, Move Your Mind, available globally on Amazon and Booktopia and stores Australia-wide. If you go to nickbracks.com/moveyourmind, you can download a free PDF of the book. And once again, thank you to Jurie Rossouw for joining me today on Move Your Mind.